Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary took us back to the origins of the Forestry Commission in the 1919 Bill. And I want to take us 400 years further back, because forestry is, of course, a strategic material. And when the Great Michael was built by James IV, with the hull 10 feet thick with Scottish oaks, all the trees of Fife were cleared to build it. And then, as now, we had to import further wood from France and from the Baltic states and from forests across Scotland to build it. So wood has been a strategic material for a very long time indeed. And indeed, Henry VIII, when he saw what James IV had done, concluded that he would build a boat even bigger than the Great Michael, which at 1,000 tons was then the biggest boat in the world that was afloat, and he built something even bigger. Flodden cut short the ambitions for the use of the Great Michael. In 1919, of course, we were responding to the strategic imperative to have wood for putting in the trenches of the First World War, where it was clear there was inadequate wood. It was recognised as an important strategic part of military operations. But as Peter Chapman reminded us as well, it's of economic value. It may be but 1% of our gross domestic product, but where that 1% lies, it is very important to communities who look after our forests, who plant them and sustain them, but equally to the forest sawmills that depend on a predictable long-term access to wood. So, as in the 1500s, so it is in the 2000s. And indeed, forestry is a very personal thing for many people. One of my late council colleagues, a good friend, Councillor Mitchell Burnett, who knew he was dying from a carcinoma, he held on long enough to ensure he got permission from Aberdeen's Council for his grave to be on the edge of the forest that he was bequeathing to his daughter. Because forestry is that kind of long-term business that we have to protect the interests of. Now, sustainable forest management has come up several times already. And I think it is certainly important that whatever we do with land is sustainable. The debate around what sustainable means will mean that it means slightly different things in slightly different contexts. And I think that's why it's proper that it should be not on the face of the bill, but that it should be expressed clearly and unambiguously elsewhere, so that we can see what it means, we can discuss and debate and challenge what it might mean. Now, the committee did divide on the matter of compulsory purchase, and indeed it's worth just reminding Parliament that the committees of this Parliament are rather freer from the strictures of the whip system than perhaps other parts of our operation. Committees, when they're working well, seek to look at the evidence before them in an objective fashion, and the individuals in committees come to conclusions. So the SNP group, because it isn't a group in the committee, divided 2 on one side of the argument and 2 on the other side of the argument. Fulton McGregor and I joined Rhoda Grant and John Finney in suggesting that the extension of the compulsory purchase orders, which we might never see used, but whose in a minute, but which I will come in a second, but which the existence of takes people to decisions a little bit faster. Now, Mr Mountain may come to a different view. Mr Mountain, sir.
Edward Mountain.
No, this isn't a political point. This is just a point that I think there may be a member of the committee within your group that you have ignored. I think there are 5 people in your group, not 4. But as you were at the meeting, I'm sure you'll be able to comment on that on reflection.
Stewart Stevenson, unlike you to make a factual error.
No, Presiding Officer. I'm constantly told by colleagues and even by friends that I'm a larger-than-life character, and I count for 1.5. And thus, when I add Fulton McGregor To me, that's 2.5 out of 5. Anyway, no, I jest. And of course, Edward Mountain, as our ever diligent convener, is of course correct. And as a mere mathematician, I am arithmetically challenged by his intervention. I accept the challenge. It is entirely correct. Now, I welcome the felling definitions, attention to felling definitions. I think it is certainly important that we get that right. Now, it is worth, of course, reminding ourselves that nature fells woods as well. And as it happens, where my wife and I have stayed for the last 14 years, we're surrounded on 3 sides by about 40 hectares of forest that appears to have been all but abandoned. And nature is busily felling what appears to me to be a mature forest. So I think it's important that we see that some of that is addressed as we take the bill forward. Coming to a conclusion, Presiding Officer, I was delighted to hear the Cabinet Secretary refer to Abriechen. I have fond memories of Abriechen. I visited there when I think I was probably about 3 or 4 years old in an old American ex-army Jeep up to Claude McClellan's croft at the top of Abriechen. It's interesting, at that time it was a very primitive place indeed, very primitive. And I think the community there having the opportunity to take some control over its own destiny will be a way in which it is fundamentally changed since I visited Abriechen, I think in the late 1940s or thereabout. The important thing in the bill, which I do welcome and others have got mixed views on, is the separation essentially between policy and operation. I think that does lead us to somewhere that's going to be a clearer way of taking things forward. Concluding, finally, Presiding Officer, it was my delight to have previously been the Minister responsible for the Forestry Commission, and in particular to have seen the highly automated sawmill in the Cabinet Secretary's own constituency at Nairn, which absolutely illustrates how this industry is a high-tech industry of economic and environmental importance to Scotland. I support what's proposed. Presiding Officer.